Hello and welcome to Get Sleepy. I'm so glad you're here tonight. Tonight, we'll drift gently into the past, far, far back in time, to the warm, golden banks of the ancient Nile, where the first whispers of a familiar fairy tale began to bloom. But before we begin our journey through time, let's take a few moments to settle in completely. Allow yourself to get comfortable. Whether you're nestled beneath soft covers or simply lying still, listening to the rhythm of your own peaceful breathing. Let your body feel heavy, like warm sand settling in an hourglass. Let your shoulders drop, just a little more. Feel your spine lengthen and soften, sinking deeper into whatever supports you. Breathe in, slowly, deeply, and breathe out even more gently, releasing everything you've carried today. Again, inhale, like breathing in the warm, spiced air of ancient Egypt. Hold it for just a moment, feeling the stillness, and exhale, letting go of all tension, all worries. Let go of the day behind you. Whatever thoughts try to return, thank them gently, and let them drift away like lotus petals floating down the great river. Tonight's story is about a girl whose name was almost lost to the sands of time. A girl whose life inspired fairy tales, poems, and legends of a slipper that would fit only her. Her name was Rhodopis, and long before Cinderella ever wore glass shoes, Rhodopis danced barefoot in Egyptian dust and dreamed beneath the endless stars. Imagine now the soft hush of evening settling over ancient Egypt. The year is impossible to mark exactly. Some say it was nearly 2,000 years before the first written Cinderella tale ever graced a page. But the world around her is vivid, alive, breathing with the rhythm of the eternal Nile. The great river, that endless ribbon of life-giving water, glides silently past marshy reeds and moonlit fields of papyrus. Palm trees sway in the still evening air, their fronds whispering secrets to the wind, casting long, gentle shadows on sun-warmed stone. The air is thick with the scent of lotus blossoms, and the distant sound of temple bells, and the soft murmur of evening prayers carried on the breeze. Somewhere, in a small, quiet courtyard behind a merchant's villa, a young girl sits brushing her hair with careful strokes. She is not a princess, not yet, and not in the way that stories usually tell us. She is barefoot, her simple tunic worn soft from many washings. But there's something in her eyes, a gentleness, a quiet dignity, as if she carries within her a story that even she doesn't know yet. This is where our tale begins, in the golden dust of ancient Egypt, with a girl who was forgotten by most, but remembered forever in whispers, as the very first Cinderella. Rhodopis was not born beneath the Egyptian sun. She was Greek, a child of the islands, born where the sea meets the sky in endless blue. Her earliest memories were of whitewashed walls and olive groves and the sound of waves against rocky shores. But those memories were like dreams now, fading, because she had been taken from her homeland when she was still very young. Some say pirates captured her, their ships appearing on the horizon like dark birds. Others say she was sold by desperate hands, when famine made survival more important than love. However it happened, she arrived in Egypt small and frightened, speaking a language that sounded like music to Egyptian ears, but music they could not understand. She was bought by a wealthy merchant, a man who dealt in spices and silk, who had a villa near the Nile and servants to tend his household. He looked at her fair skin, her golden hair that caught sunlight like captured flame, and her cheeks that stayed rosy even in fear. "Rhodopis," he said, giving her a name that meant rosy cheeks, because even in her sadness, her face remained warm and bright. Rhodopis was set to work immediately. She scrubbed floors with her small hands, the stone cold beneath her knees. She ground grain into flour, the heavy stones wearing at her arms. She carried water from the well, clay jars balanced carefully on her narrow shoulders. And she washed linens in the river. Her hands grew rough from the work, but her spirit somehow remained soft. The other servants were not kind to her. They teased her for her difference, for her hair that was golden where theirs was dark, for her skin that was pale where theirs was sun-kissed, for her accent that made their language sound strange on her tongue. "Look at the foreign girl," they would whisper. "She thinks she's better than us, with her strange hair and her strange ways." But Rhodopis never raised her voice in anger. When they laughed, she simply looked down at her work. When they scolded, she nodded and continued with her tasks. And when the day's work was finally done, when the others had gone to their quarters to rest, she would dance in the shade of the fig trees. When the compound was quiet, Rhodopis would slip away to a small corner of the garden. There, with only the stars as her audience, she would close her eyes and remember. She would turn in small, graceful circles, her arms outstretched like a bird learning to fly. She danced like petals caught in a gentle breeze, like light skipping across the surface of still water, like the waves she remembered from her childhood, constant and eternal and beautiful. No one had taught her these movements. Her feet simply knew what to do. Her body remembered rhythms from a homeland she could barely recall. And in those moments, dancing alone in the Egyptian moonlight, she was not a servant. She was not a slave. She was simply herself. Sometimes, as she danced, she would whisper stories to herself in Greek. Stories of sea gods and brave maidens, of heroes who traveled across oceans, of girls who were lost but eventually found their way home. The words felt like honey on her tongue, sweet and familiar, a connection to the girl she had been before. The other servants sometimes caught glimpses of her dancing. They would shake their heads and whisper among themselves, "She's strange, that one, dancing alone like a spirit. What kind of person dances when they should be sleeping?" But Rhodopis didn't care about their whispers. The dance was hers. The stories were hers. And somewhere deep in her heart, she believed that someday, someone would see her truly. Someone would understand that she was more than just a servant girl with foreign hair. One particularly warm afternoon, when the sun hung heavy in the sky like a golden coin, the other servants had gone to the market in the village. They had not invited Rhodopis to come with them. They rarely did. Left alone with her chores finished, Rhodopis decided to take a walk along the edge of the great river. The Nile stretched before her like a mirror, reflecting the palm trees and the cloudless sky. The water shimmered with light, thousands of tiny diamonds dancing on the surface. Lotus flowers drifted lazily, their white and pink petals perfect against the dark water. Dragonflies hovered in the heat, their wings catching the sun like fragments of rainbow. And everywhere, the sound of water, gentle and constant, like the world's oldest lullaby. She walked carefully along the bank, her worn sandals making soft sounds on the mud. These sandals were her only possessions, simple leather bound with cord, but she cared for them as if they were made of gold, because they were hers. In a life where nothing belonged to her, these sandals were the only things that were truly Rhodopis's. The heat was intense, and the cool water looked so inviting. She glanced around, saw no one, and carefully stepped out of her sandals. She placed them side by side on a flat stone, like small boats waiting for their captain to return. Then she stepped into the water. The coolness was immediate, wonderful, a relief that traveled from her feet up through her entire body. She leaned back against the smooth stone, closed her eyes, and let the water lap gently at her ankles. For a moment, she was not in Egypt. She was not a servant. She was simply a girl, enjoying the simple pleasure of cool water on a hot day. And then, the world changed. A shadow passed overhead. At first, Rhodopis thought it was a cloud, but the sky was clear. She opened her eyes and looked up, shading her face with her hand. High above, circling in the endless blue, was an eagle. Not just any eagle, but a magnificent creature with wings that seemed to span the entire sky. Its feathers were golden brown, catching the sunlight, and its eyes, even from such a distance, seemed to be looking directly at her. The eagle circled once, twice, its cry echoing across the water, and then, with a sudden rush of air that stirred Rhodopis's hair, it swooped down. She watched in fascination rather than fear. There was something about the bird's movements, something graceful, purposeful, that made her feel she was witnessing something important. The eagle landed briefly on the stone beside her, and with careful precision, picked up one of her sandals in its powerful beak. For a moment, the bird and girl looked at each other. Rhodopis saw intelligence in those golden eyes, and something else, something that felt almost like recognition. Then the eagle spread its wings, lifted into the air, and began to fly, not away, but in slow, deliberate circles, as if showing her something, as if saying goodbye. "Wait," Rhodopis called softly, but the bird was already rising higher. She watched as it grew smaller, a golden speck against the blue, until it disappeared entirely over the palm trees. She sat on the stone for a long moment, looking at her remaining sandal. The other servants would think she was careless, losing her shoe to a bird, but Rhodopis felt something different, something that made her heart beat faster. It was as if the gods themselves had decided to play a game, and somehow she was part of it. Far from the villa, far from the quiet riverbank where Rhodopis sat, the young pharaoh of Egypt was holding court. He sat beneath a canopy of finest linen, dyed the deep blue of the night sky, surrounded by scribes and advisors and courtiers. The morning had been filled with the usual business of ruling, disputes to settle, tributes to accept, messages from distant provinces to consider. But now, in the heat of midday, when even the birds sought shade, the pharaoh found his thoughts wandering. He was young, younger than many who had worn the double crown before him, and sometimes, in moments like these, he felt the weight of all those eyes upon him, all those expectations, all those decisions that would affect thousands of lives. He was thinking about responsibility, about the loneliness of power, when the sky above him suddenly darkened. A great bird passed overhead, casting a shadow across the royal pavilion. The courtiers looked up, murmuring among themselves. But the pharaoh's attention was caught by something else, something small, falling from the sky like a gift from the gods. It landed at his feet with a soft thud. A sandal, simple leather, worn but well cared for, the kind worn by common people. But there was something about it, something that made the pharaoh lean forward in his throne. He picked it up carefully, turned it over in his hands. It was small, delicate, clearly made for a woman's foot. The leather was soft, supple, as if it had been worn by someone who walked gently through the world. "What is it, my lord?" asked his chief advisor. The pharaoh held up the sandal, studying it in the sunlight. "It's beautiful," he said quietly, "but it's just a common shoe." "No," the pharaoh said, and something in his voice made the courtiers fall silent. "It's not common at all." He looked up at the sky, where the eagle had disappeared. Then he looked at the sandal again, at its simple beauty. By the way, it seemed to hold stories in its worn leather. "I want to find her," he said. "Her? The woman who wore this shoe. I want to know who she is." The courtiers exchanged glances. "But my lord, it could belong to anyone, any common woman." The pharaoh stood, the sandal still in his hands. "That's exactly why I need to find her," he said. "Send messengers. Search every village. Find me the woman whose foot fits this shoe." The royal messengers spread out across the kingdom like ripples on water. They carried the sandal with them, wrapped in silk, treated like a precious relic. In every village, every town, every settlement along the Nile, they would stop and make their proclamation. By order of the pharaoh, they would call, "Let every woman come forward. Let every woman try on this shoe. She who fits it will be brought before the throne." And the women came. They came in crowds, in groups, in families. Mothers pushed their daughters forward. Sisters fought over who would try first. Some came dressed in their finest clothes, hoping to impress the royal messengers. But none could fit the sandal. Some feet were too large, spilling over the edges. Others were too small, lost in the leather. Some tried to force their feet in, pushing and squeezing, hoping to make themselves fit. The messengers watched patiently, but with growing disappointment. Day after day, village after village, and no success. Meanwhile, back at the villa, Rhodopis continued her work. She had said nothing about the eagle, about the lost sandal. When the other servants asked where her shoe had gone, she simply said it had been lost in the river. They scolded her for her carelessness, but she bore their words quietly. She had one sandal left, which she wore on her right foot. Her left foot remained bare, but somehow, she didn't mind. There was something about walking half-shod that felt right, as if she were between two worlds, waiting for something to happen. She had begun to have dreams. Dreams of flying, of soaring above the Nile like a bird. Dreams of golden light, of voices calling her name. Dreams of someone, somewhere, looking for her. On a morning when the air was particularly still, when even the palm fronds hung motionless, the sound of approaching horses broke the silence. Rhodopis was in the courtyard, grinding grain, when she heard the voices at the gate. Royal messengers. Even through the thick walls, she could hear the authority in their voices, the formality, the importance. The other servants came running, excitement bright in their eyes. "The pharaoh's men are here. They're looking for someone. They have a shoe. A woman's shoe." Rhodopis felt her heart begin to race. She looked down at her bare left foot, at the single sandal on her right, and suddenly, she knew. The merchant came bustling out, eager to receive such important visitors. The gate opened, and the messengers entered. Their white robes are pristine. Their bearing is dignified. One of them carried a silk-wrapped bundle. With great ceremony, he unwrapped it, and there, gleaming in the sunlight, was Rhodopis's sandal. By order of the pharaoh, the messenger announced, "Let every woman in this household come forward. She whose foot fits this shoe will be brought before the throne." The other servants rushed forward, pushing and jostling, each eager to be first. But Rhodopis remained where she was, kneeling by the grinding stone, watching. One by one, the women tried on the sandal. One by one, they failed. Too big, too small, too wide, too narrow. None could fit the simple leather shoe. The messengers began to look disappointed. "Are there no other women in this household?" one asked. The merchant looked around, his eyes passing over the servants and landing on Rhodopis. "Only her," he said, almost dismissively. "But she's just a Greek slave. Surely you don't need to." "We try every woman," the messenger said firmly. "Those are our orders." Rhodopis stood slowly. Her legs felt unsteady, as if she were walking on clouds rather than solid ground. She approached the messengers, aware of every eye upon her. The other servants whispered among themselves, "Rhodopis? But she's nobody. She's just a foreign girl. What would the pharaoh want with her?" But Rhodopis heard their voices as if from a great distance. All her attention was focused on the sandal, her sandal, lying on the silk cloth. She knelt before the messenger, extended her bare left foot, and watched as he carefully, almost reverently, slipped the sandal onto her foot. Fit perfectly, not just well, but perfectly, as if it had been made specifically for her foot, as if it belonged nowhere else in the world. The messenger stared. The other servants fell silent. Even the merchant's eyes widened in disbelief. It's impossible," someone whispered. But Rhodopis reached down, and from beneath her tunic, she pulled out the matching sandal, the one the eagle had left behind. She slipped it onto her right foot. The pair was complete, and at that moment, everyone could see the truth. This was no accident. This was destiny. The messengers wasted no time. Within the hour, Rhodopis found herself sitting beside one of them on a boat that glided smoothly down the Nile. She had been given clean clothes, simple but fine, and her hair had been braided with care. But she barely noticed these preparations. Her attention was caught by the world passing by. The river she had known only from the banks now carried her like a dream. Temples rose from the water's edge, their columns reaching toward the sky. Palm groves swayed in the distance, green and peaceful, and everywhere, the gentle sound of water, constant and soothing. The messenger who sat beside her was kind. He offered her food, water, shade when the sun grew too intense. "Are you frightened?" he asked. Rhodopis considered the question. "No," she said finally. "I feel like I'm going home." The messenger smiled. "The pharaoh will be pleased to hear that." "What is he like?" Rhodopis asked. "Young, wise, lonely, I think. He has been searching for something, or someone." As they traveled, Rhodopis felt herself changing. Not her appearance, but something deeper. She was no longer just a servant girl. She was no longer just a foreigner. She was someone the pharaoh had sought. someone important enough to search an entire kingdom for. The thought should have been overwhelming, but instead, it felt right, like a story that had been waiting to unfold. The palace rose from the desert like a vision. White limestone walls gleamed in the sunlight, so bright they seemed to glow. Golden ornaments caught the light, throwing sparkles across the water. Flags and banners fluttered in the breeze, bright colors against the blue sky. But what struck Rhodopis most was not the grandeur. It was the sense of rightness, as if she had seen this place before, in dreams, in the stories she told herself. The boat docked at a private quay. Rhodopis was escorted through gardens filled with flowers she had never seen. Lotus pools reflected the sky. Peacocks wandered freely, their calls echoing off the stone walls. And everywhere, the soft sound of fountains, water dancing in the air. Servants bowed as they passed, not to her, but to the messengers who accompanied her. But Rhodopis noticed that their eyes lingered on her, curious, respectful, as if they sensed something important was happening. Finally, they reached a great hall. The ceiling soared above them, painted with stars and birds and flowing water. Columns lined the walls, each one carved with intricate designs. And at the far end, on a throne of gold and lapis lazuli, sat the pharaoh. He was younger than Rhodopis had expected, not much older than herself. With kind eyes and a gentle bearing, he wore the double crown of Egypt. But somehow, it didn't make him seem distant. It made him seem responsible, like someone who carried the weight of the world, and did so willingly. Rhodopis walked toward him slowly. She had been told to bow, to prostrate herself, but something in his expression stopped her. He was looking at her not as a subject, but as a person, as someone he had been waiting to meet. "You are the one," he said, and it wasn't a question. "Yes, my lord. The sandal fits you." "It's my sandal, my lord. The eagle took it from the riverbank." The pharaoh smiled. "The eagle brought it to me. It fell from the sky, as if the gods themselves had sent it." "Perhaps they did," Rhodopis said, and was surprised by her own boldness. But the pharaoh's smile only widened. "What is your name?" "Rhodopis, my lord." "Do you know what your name means?" "Rosy cheeks." "And do you know why you're here?" Rhodopis thought carefully. "Because you were looking for me." "Yes, but do you know why I was looking for you?" "No, my lord." The pharaoh stood from his throne. He walked down the steps until he stood directly in front of her. "Because I have been waiting," he said simply, "for someone real, someone whose story reached me not through words, but through the wind, through fate." He gestured to the sandal she wore. "This is not just a shoe. It's a symbol of someone who walks gently through the world, someone who dances alone and dreams of being understood." Rhodopis's eyes widened. "How do you know that I dance?" "I don't know. I feel it. Just as I feel that you tell yourself stories, that you remember a homeland across the sea, that you have waited, just as I have waited." They talked for hours. The pharaoh dismissed his courtiers, sent away the servants, and spoke with Rhodopis as the sun moved across the sky. He told her about the loneliness of power, about making decisions that affected thousands, about the weight of the crown. She told him about dancing in the moonlight, about stories whispered in Greek, about the feeling of being forever between worlds. And slowly, they began to understand. They were both searching, both waiting, both carrying dreams too large for the worlds they had known. "I don't want to make you a queen," the pharaoh said finally. Rhodopis felt a moment of confusion. "You don't. I want to ask you to choose, to stay not because you must, but because you want to be yourself, not what others expect you to be." He paused, looked out through the great windows at the Nile beyond. "I have been searching for someone who understands that power is not about ruling, but about serving. That leadership is not about commanding, but about caring. And you think I understand that? I think you've been living it, in your kindness to others, in your patience with those who were unkind to you, in your ability to find beauty even in hardship." Rhodopis felt tears prick her eyes. I don't know how to be anything but what I am." "That's exactly what I hoped you would say." The pharaoh offered her a choice. She could return to the villa, to her old life, with his gratitude and his protection, or she could stay, not as a captive, not as a possession, but as a partner, someone who would help him rule wisely, who would remind him of the people beyond the palace walls. "I need time to think," Rhodopis said. "Of course, take all the time you need." That night, Rhodopis was given a room in the palace. It was beautiful, more beautiful than anything she had ever seen. Silk hangings, soft carpets, a bed piled high with cushions. But what drew her attention was the window. It looked out over the Nile, over the water that had carried her to this moment. She sat by the window, watching the moonlight dance on the water, and she thought about her choices, about the life she had known, and the life she was being offered, about dreams and reality, and the strange way fate had brought her here. In the morning, she had her answer. She found the pharaoh in the garden, sitting by a lotus pool, watching the sunrise. He looked up as she approached, his eyes questioning but patient. "I have decided," she said, "and I will stay, not because you are pharaoh, but because I believe we can help each other. You need someone who remembers what it feels like to be powerless. I need someone who understands the weight of responsibility." The pharaoh smiled. Together, together. And so began a partnership that would become legend. Not a fairy tale of instant transformation, but a story of two people choosing to build something beautiful together. Of understanding, of respect, of love that grew slowly and surely, like the Nile itself. Years passed. Rhodopis and the pharaoh ruled together, not as master and servant, but as partners. They built schools, supported artists, ensured that no child in their kingdom would go hungry, and they remembered, always, where they had come from. The story of the sandal spread. People told it, retold it, changed it, added to it. Some said she became a queen overnight. Others said she lived quietly by the river, dancing in the evenings, writing her memories on scrolls that no one ever found. But all agreed something magical had happened. A girl who had been nearly forgotten, who had once danced in dust and silence, had been seen, chosen, remembered, and not because of beauty or riches or magic spells, but because she was kind, because she waited with patience, because she kept her story alive, even when no one else seemed to listen. That's the real heart of every Cinderella story. Not the transformation, not the gown, not the glass slipper, but the girl underneath, the one who survives, the one who hopes, the one who remembers how to dream. Now, as your breathing slows, As your body sinks deeper into rest, picture the river one last time, the eternal Nile, flowing quietly through the desert, carrying stories, carrying dreams, carrying the hopes of all who have ever lived along its banks. The stars shimmer overhead, reflected in the dark water like diamonds scattered on black silk. A pair of sandals rests on a flat stone near the water's edge, empty now, but somehow still warm, still holding the memory of the girl who wore them. And somewhere, beyond the reeds, beyond the palm trees, beyond the reach of time itself, a girl dances softly, her feet bare, her heart light, her spirit free. She dances in the moonlight, surrounded by the gentle hush of night, and she knows, finally, that she is home. Sleep well, dear listener, rest peacefully, and remember, every forgotten story, every lost dream, every act of kindness, they all matter. They all find their way home. In the end, sweet dreams.